base, dynasty rankings, Devers, Nolan, and Manny Moore to discuss. It's time for Dingers.
This is Dingers, way more than fantasy baseball. We keep it real when we talk and knock it straight out the park. Let's see the stats. What's the average draft position? What kind of plays you making? Check the wins above replacement. Check the lineups and the points. This I gotta see. What's your path to victory? Are they aiming for a dynasty? Get points going head to head. Please don't do me no favors. We're always watching waivers. Ain't no minor league. This is major. Yeah, Dingers. Let's go.
Welcome to Dingers, the only fantasy baseball podcast for smart people. It's not just Austin Riley that wins you championships. That's why week in and week out, we're delivering tips and strategies to help you live that straight up OG lifestyle. Tyler Childs joined again by Robbie Baseball from The Murderer. What's happening, Robbie?
Nothing. Just complaining to you about how long my week was and all the plowing. But hey, I got 3 days off coming up. Fantasy baseball will be dedicated.
Do you know what needs some plowing? The MLB.
My wife.
MLB,
sorry, what?
PA intro. They need to get that whole debate thing figured out over there at MLB. Let's go, guys. They did say today that today's the 3rd of February. They're bringing in a federal arbitrator, or they're attempting to, because they're going nowhere. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with
terrible because
it's stupid
in dynasty leagues right now. And that's what we are. We are dynasty focused. First time listeners, welcome. We need forward momentum so that the guys who you play in your leagues with get jacked up and are ready to do things. Because right now you might have, if you're in a 30-team league, at most 10 guys are like, all right, let's get to this offseason, right? It's February. We need to get moving. Everybody else is like, I don't really care. I'm not putting any work. I'm not Googling any names. I don't care about prospects. I don't care about veterans. There's so many impactful players that are not signed right now. There are so many kind of nobodies who are not signed right now. And we need spring training dates coming up. You know, we need to know what's happening in order to really jazz up the whole fantasy baseball realm. And I mean, it sucks. It sucks that they got to go to this point that they can't just agree.
Well, and this is the only time I'm ever going to agree with the other fantasy baseball minds when they say spring training stats don't matter, because they don't matter right now. Because there are none. So
April stats might not matter because there might not be any of those either. And God, I really don't want that. I don't want that. Doing that just makes me want to drink. Oh, just thinking about that.
A long time ago, someone decided to put stuff in glass bottles. In some of these bottles, they put juice or milk, and that was stupid. Today, only alcohol and a few other products remain in the containers from the gods. It's time for beers and bourbon, because good advice only comes in a bottle.
I've lost my touch on the cork pop.
Well, I'm into double pops. Oh yeah, that's right. Because I'm having another Crown Float. What are you drinking?
I'm going with Old Faithful here. We have Basil Hayden this evening. I'm really looking forward to an upcoming trip that I have to Miami, where naturally I'm going to pick up some bourbon. Miami, the home of bourbon.
Yeah, Miami and bourbon go together like truckers in Ottawa. Whoa,
whoa, zing! That's where we. You know what we do need? We need a truck horn now for a sound effect.
Oh, that was.
I feel like
good.
that joke can play now.
Well,
if there is a position on the field of play that
like
most aligns with truckers, it is third base. So I think this is the perfect segue into that. Third base is an interesting position. There's some polar nature to the position. We've got some studs. We've got some duds. We've got some guys on the rise. And we're going to get into it today as we plow through this list here. So we got 65 we're going to talk about today. Some are notable because of the weakness of the position. Others are notable because they might be a guy someday. If they don't fit the list, you probably shouldn't be thinking about him. But that's just the reality of Dynasty Baseball. So, Robbie, let's get started here at number 65, Tristan English. You know, the scouting report, as we discussed pre-show on Tristan English, is 24 years old at high A. It is a college bat, right? So there is some patience that you could offer up, but at the same time, you'd like to see a little bit more of growth out of Tristan English because the numbers at high A aren't overly exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ty, I just noticed something here. I'm looking further back at we've got a couple of guys, 89 and 90. If you have a quick look here, who we both ranked considerably higher than 89 and 90, and I'm not sure why they're not up where they're supposed to be.
You go ahead and keep powering
Sure.
through. I will adjust those guys so they get to the right spot.
Sure. So Tristan English, yeah, as Ty said, it's a 24-year-old who's not crushing. He's old for his level, high A, not doing great things. So it's time to kind of pass. If you're going to get rid of somebody, that's not the worst guy, to consider getting rid of. There's a couple guys who were drafted because we did have conversations with some of you listeners, and you can always find us at Dingers Pod on Twitter. You can, at us with a question. And they said, what's up with first year player draft guys? Why are they not in your list? Why are J2 guys not in your list? Well, we do a 5-year window of MLB production. And the new fun, exciting thing to do is to have MLB teams draft 18-year-olds in the first round and give them millions of dollars, and then have dynasty evaluators say they've got a beautiful swing. They've got the sky's the limit, and they rank them in the 50s in the top 100. And then they're nowhere to be found on our list. And the reason is that because that's not how it works as far as producing from your draft date. Yes, there's some value. If you have Khalil Watson, yeah, he's got some value. You've got Jack Leiter Jr. They got value, but they don't have the ability, especially when you get to the high school guys. They're not going to be up in 3 years. That's the earliest you can expect to see a current 18-year-old up. And look what happened with Jared Kelenic, right? Beautiful swing, beautiful minor league, rise up, and then he gets up and overmatched, right? Overmatched. And then he's learning the game. That's why they're not on our list. We're looking for production. So if you're like, Wes Cass should be on this list from the White Sox, James Triantos should be on this list. They're way at the back. Because they're not yet in the 5-year window of good production. And one guy I'm going to mention is Jackson Glenn with Pittsburgh. I think he could do some things, but Jackson Glenn, in order to do some things with Pittsburgh, is going to need opportunity. He was drafted last year, I think in the 4th round, given a terribly small signing bonus. And we're going to talk about him when we get to prospects. But we all know that Ke'Bryan Hayes is at third base. The things that Pittsburgh has nothing invested in Glenn, and he's got a great hit tool. So the possibility exists that he's going to max out at, say, AA this year coming up, or maybe AAA, or maybe he'll find his way all the way up to the show, and he might move around, and maybe the DH creates some more playing time or something like that. But it's not reasonable to say that these are impact guys. And Jackson Glenn did not get millions of dollars. Like I said, he got a very small signing bonus, like under 20,000. Like he may have been $7,500. That might be his. And like I can look and find that out. But we're talking about the guys who are actually going to impact rosters. And even though we're starting at 60 some, the list sucks. It's just that we all play in big leagues, and we want those guys who can help you out for small pockets.
Would you say that Jackson Glenn is the Kevin Pillar of third base?
I did not want to make the comparison because we always get called out for being homers, but I am wearing a Toronto Tulowitzki jersey. Thank you.
Nice.
Retired. Way to ruin the Hall of Fame run. I know. Go to Toronto. But anyway, well, the difference between Pilar and Glenn is just the fact that Glenn was drafted way higher. But the signing bonus is exactly right, Ty. And then he reported right away, started playing, started raking, and then got promoted. And he's 23 years old, so he's old for his level when he got there. I think at low A, moved up to high, still old for his level. So I think they're just going to push him through. So he's just someone to note. He's not someone to like pencil in as like future stud, anything like that. Yeah, of course it could work out, right? Guys come out of nowhere all the time. But this is like a college senior, and he had no bargaining power. And there's no way he was going to go back to school because there's no school to go back to. So this was it for him, and Pittsburgh took a chance on him. I think Mike Jarvis is another guy from Pittsburgh that they did the same thing with. But dart throws, like absolute dart throws. So take that with a grain of salt. But anyway, back to the big list. Asdrubal Cabrera finds himself on a team every year and finds himself doing good things at different points in the year every year. Playing time is going to go down next year, assuming he does find a team at this moment in time. He's a free agent. Yaros Munoz with Boston, who I think in 2020 had a couple good weeks. I'm trying to remember exactly what it was.
He played left field for a little bit, and that's where things got interesting. Like the odds of him playing on the infield rely entirely on devastating injuries to multiple players. So the odds of Munoz finding a way on the infield are very, very low. Could be an outfield depth. You know what he could evolve into? Could be Boston's homegrown, or not homegrown, but Boston's import of a Kiki Hernandez type, right? Like that's what Munoz could be with a little less pop, just that guy that's the jackknife type of player, provides a little bit of value here and there. But the Kiki Hernandez we know today is very different than the Kike that we saw for many years in LA, even though he had some very clutch moments out there, did not prolong success. That's kind of the message here. So next on the list, Sheldon Noisy, the Oakland Athletics, kind of a guy that could have some moments. Like I'm not a Noise guy. Like I know you're here. I'm just not in on him. I'm not as excited as you are. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add here, because he's just not a guy I'm paying attention to. And he did go over to the Dodgers, right? Because he was I
was just gonna say he moved teams in the offseason.
Well, didn't he get released or waiver claim or something? Like I feel like there was a waiver claim.
He played with the Dodgers this year. I can try to look at transactions to see exactly.
But his numbers with the Dodgers this year are not pretty. No, and I watched a couple of those games. Like 26 strikeouts and 65 at bats is just not going to get it done. I don't know if there's something else here. I'm out because I watched a lot of those games on the West Coast, as I've talked about all the time. I love the West Coast games, and the at bats I did see for him were just there was just nothing that gave me spark of hope. So go ahead.
He's got the ability to hit at AAA, both average OPS, and that's what it is. But again, we're the 64 range, and we're talking about a guy that is 26 years old, playing this year, coming up at 27. So that's why he is where he is.
Best.
100%. This is organizational depth, like we talked about with Matt Beattie in a previous episode, but Beattie has been more successful to date. So, which brings us up to a prospect, Mark Vientos. Depending on your level of dedication, I can't remember if it was 18 that Vientos was drafted or not, with the Mets, and he has been somebody who's just consistently supposed to be, moving up the charts, supposed to be doing things. And he got to AAA last year. I think, what's he going to play this year at 22? So that's what happens when you're a high school drafted kid. And average OPS, decent. Power, what was he for the year? Sorry, I'm just trying to have a look at the full power. 25 dingers last year between AA and AAA. And he seems to be on, knocking on the door, but it's the Mets. What are they going to do with him? Are they going to give him more seasoning? He had just a little bit of time in AAA, 11 games. So it looks like this will be a AAA season. One of the reasons why he's further back in the list again is because I'm not expecting to see any significant bats. Definitely finish next year still with rookie eligibility. And then the potential real jump will come after the 2022 season. So that's why he is where he is. There isn't a thing here that makes me think we're in big trouble, except for a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk rate and a 33% K rate. But that's still not like devastating. That's not boom or bust.
No, but to go with 25 home runs, you can live with that, right? In 350 plate appearances, 310 at bats. So, that's nothing you're going to be shocked about. The 933 OPS is exciting. I mean, this is a guy that I think is going to move up our list rather quickly in the next couple of years, Robbie. I just think he's not quite turned that corner yet. And I think you hit the nail on the head. I think we'll see him in September if he has a good season. I don't think we'll see him before that, because the Mets did go ahead and add a little bit of depth in that outfield. So I just don't think there's any spots for him to have.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at the next guy here, Ty, Austin Shenton of Tampa Bay, who was I forget what it was, the reliever trade I think that Shenton moved
That
in
was
season.
what is his name? Diego Castillo.
Yes, thank you, Castillo. And Shenton is an average guy. Again, like double A with both teams this year. Hasn't seen triple A yet, but 271 and 326 for a 295 on the year average. And that includes a promotion from high A Everett with Seattle. And, again, chugging along. Now, he's a little older, entering his age 24 season this year coming up. But it's Tampa Bay, and that's one of those issues, right? Where's the guy going to go?
Sneaky 14 home runs, right? 947 OPS. Like, this isn't, you mentioned the contact. I don't know that it's a contact only bat. I think there's enough here that we might see 20 home runs potentially.
Okay.
But the playing time, definitely an issue in Tampa Bay. There's no argument there. Like, he's got to step over some people to get into that starting lineup. But, I wouldn't rule it out. Tampa Bay does some interesting things. He could be playing first base. You never know. Jumping ahead, Nick Quintana in Detroit. Want to talk about some significant roadblocks. He's going to have some there. Can you play center field? That's going to be the question that they're going to be asking Nick Quintana, and I'm guessing the answer is no. Robbie, how do you feel about this? I know we talked briefly about him before we jumped on today.
The idea originally was that I was looking for a lot of progression out of him, and I kind of thought he was somebody who was going to fly under the radar. The problem is that he's been so bad that he's under the radar for a reason. He's just not performing. And even last year, like we're talking about a 23-year-old who played rookie and A-ball last year and headed out of the season with a 187 average. Didn't get to play a full year. He had 311 at bats between the two, but he was predominantly at A-ball, and it's not great. There isn't a ton of power. It's just that he's got a really good eye. 51 walks to 73 strikeouts at A, but I'm assuming that means he should be better. But that's almost like what's the deal, right? What pitch can he not hit? And if it's a fastball, I was gonna say if it's a fastball, then he's screwed, and that's all he's gonna be getting. But he's taking his walks, right? As much as he's striking out, he's taking his walks. But I don't know if it's going to click. And he's ranked up where he is now, and it's entirely possible he just falls right off next year. Because we're not talking top 20 guys right now. We're talking about guys like Quintana, who could fall off the board, and guys like Shenton and Vientos, who could really move up quite a bit. So it's just that at this moment in time, this is a big prove-it year for some of these guys, and that includes the next guy up in Keone Cavaco with Minnesota. Cavaco was what, a first round pick?
Yep,
or late
13th overall. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a high school tool. Shortstop profiles maybe at one of the corner positions. One of the other infield positions, maybe the keystone. I think odds are I think this is probably a second baseman over a third baseman. Realistically, it's too early to say for sure. And this is also under the assumption Royce Lewis is the shortstop. So we'll see how that progresses over the next couple of years in Minnesota. But, very limited success with the bat in 2021, 245 plate appearances, 2 home runs, only 7 doubles, OPS under 600, not exciting at this stage. But high school bat, lots of time, just age 20 at this point. So lots of progression. For me, I want to see a 250 batting average this year. That's going to be the thing. I need to see that jump. I'm less concerned with the OPS from a 20-year-old. People way overestimate. We've been so spoiled with the Vladis and the Tatises and the guys that are just generational guys that we've seen over the last couple of years coming through, and everybody assumes these 20-year-olds should be hitting 30 home runs these days, and that's just not realistic for everybody. So these are kind of guys that you can get a steal on, right? They can kind of come into the scenario late, and you can do some things a little bit cheap. Robbie, we lost the broadcast here.
Yeah, I saw that. I will say my bit here. Reynaldo Delgado is the exact mirror image of Keone Cavaco, a guy that needs to play up, play better. And this is a year for him to do that, but he's also getting his MLB, not MLB. He's also getting his minor league experience right now, as he's only going to be playing this year at age 22. He's been, since 18, been with Cleveland, and he had a good start with them. And since then, it's just been kind of middling. So it's a matter of what's going to happen with him and where can we honestly expect to see him set this year. At high A, he did not do much with a 208 average and 609 OPS. The thing with him is that he's fast. He can steal bases if he wants. It's just, what are we going to see? And this might be the year that we do luck into it, or it kind of bottoms out for him. And again, we're at that point with some of these prospects where that's just going to happen here.
Yep, I completely agree. I mean, we also have to remember that, we have a scenario here where Cleveland's stacked, right? At the shortstop position, the infield in general, there's not a lot of room for the progression here of Delgado, because as he gets to the upper levels, he's going to be competing with guys that are realistic major league bats. So we really need a big step forward from Delgado. The one thing that I personally invested into Delgado over Broca and a lot of the other guys in that roster a few years back. And this looks like one that I maybe got wrong. So I'm going to hold the fingers in the old cross position that he takes a huge step forward this year. Still just 21, lots of time. And because of the depth in Cleveland, he doesn't need to be rushed. But this is a guy that can play a little bit of defense as well. So we're going to see him have an opportunity at all levels to work on some of that fielding. Lots to look forward to still, but just maybe keep that radar up that this might not be a high-end guy. He's slowly slipping back down Cleveland's board as they rebuild that farm system. So definitely a red flag here, I think.
Yeah, Ryan Vlad is the guy with Colorado who's also absolute trash. He's never had a hit in the bigs. What's that? Oh, he's had 6 at bats. Yeah. No, I'm just joking. He was a high school drafted guy in 17. And he's sorry. I'm just
Ryan Vlad equals trash.
Yeah, these guys had 6 major league at bats. But anyway, he had a pretty good year, double A. Triple A. He skipped double A because of the strike shortened year, 284 average last year, but no power. So if we're talking about a third baseman, we need to see a ton of extra base hits. Well, we had 33 of them. Count the 7 home runs he had last year. We had 40 extra base hits total. You want to see more than that when a guy had a full season at 470 at bats.
I'd like to propose a concept for how to approach Colorado prospects from this point forward. Instead of getting excited about the guys with great stats, let's just invest heavily into the guys with terrible stats, because the guys with good stats continue to disappoint us. And with the bad stat guys, maybe, just maybe, we can be rewarded with blind trust and blind luck instead of just constantly being disappointed by corner infield prospects.
I don't mind that.
Is a reasonable approach. And I mean, it looks like what the front office has done. So why not follow suit? Hudson Potts ahead here in Boston. This is another team that has like franchise staples at the corner position, right? Like the reality of Hudson Potts finding time in a Boston uniform at third base are extremely low. There was a glimmer of hope when Devers kept throwing the ball into the 30th row. But now that he seemed to, kind of resembled the ability to play infield at the third base position here every now and then, I think it's less likely. But, for Hudson Potts, there's definitely a fall off, right? Like, I think he's one that really got hurt by the 2020 season. I think there was some progression here, and we're starting to see growth, a little consistency. But since the 2020 season, just not that bounce back that we're looking for. 281
injury riddled 2021. That was the big issue. Yeah,
correct. So we need to see a righting of the ship. But I mean, honestly, if you go back further in the minor league career, like there's just not consistency anywhere. So to all of a sudden expect that, I think it's just unrealistic here. A little bit of power, a little bit of hit tool every now and then. So still something to keep an eye on, but these are the kind of guys for me personally, Robbie, that I'm out on, because that wave and that inconsistency, those are the things that if you're in a head-to-head, and whether it's points or category, doesn't matter. These guys murder you. Evan Longoria, I've talked about this one before, is notoriously streaky, or was in his peak days, and cost people championships, also won people championships, right? And this is that kind of profile, but with less upside. So staying away for me. I don't know about you, Robbie.
No, I am the same. Arroyo, the only issue, Ty, is that in one league that we play in together, I've had him since a prospect. I will continue to keep him. He also, I think this is his final year contract in that league with me. And I like that. I like that he hasn't flamed out. He moved teams, right? He went from San Francisco to Tampa Bay while he was a prospect, then moved to Cleveland, and then Cleveland to Boston, but he finally was able to get some time. So he's only entering his age 27 season. There's certainly career ahead of him, as long as there's health and some production ahead of him too. And this is not a starter in your big leagues. This is a bench bat in 24 plus league. If you got him and you're banking on a lot more than that, then your team better have some studs, because he would fall into that dud category at the moment.
Well, and realistically, he's arbitration eligible. Now, like I don't think we've he got tendered an agreement for this year, I believe, right?
I was under the impression he was under contract.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he got tendered, but this is the kind of guy that this time next season might not be tendered an agreement, right? He's a free agent in 2025. He's arbitration eligible. So this could be a potential teammate of Mel Rojas Jr. in Japan. But we'll see. We'll see. I mean, he's the kind of guy that fits that middle ground of like, is it really worth me staying here, or can I go make some extra bucks across the pond? And so I say that jokingly, but also very realistically at the same time. Moving ahead here, Malcolm Nunez in St. Louis is a guy that, again, facing infield depth here. I think there's I'm a guy that's always been a St. Louis guy. I got to be honest, like I'm slowly leaving that camp. They just haven't really done a great job churning out prospects over the last several years, and you've seen that major shift as they've invested heavily into free agency. Corner, and I guess they I don't know if they invested into Nolan Arenado or if they were invested into with Nolan Arenado. I don't know how that works.
They gave up Austin Gomber, so they invested.
Isn't a Gomber like one of those like guys that are in Super Mario? The little guys that run along the ground.
That's a Goomba, you racist.
How's that racist?
I don't know.
Jeez, throwing that around.
Oh, sorry. It's been a long week. I've been meeting with HR a lot. Unrelated. Anyway, Nunez just hasn't done enough yet. But again, we're talking about a guy who's only going to play this year at 21. Same thing as the next guy up, Luis Toribio, Toribio. With San Francisco. Same thing. He's playing at, I think he played at high A last year. Nothing to write home about yet. The problem is that we're still in the 50s here with him.
But when you throw the big yet on it, right? Like you're giving people hope, right?
Well,
and
he's a year and a half younger than the age he's been playing, or than the level he's playing at. So,
and as they say in Star Wars, rebellions are built on hope.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that got dropped right there.
Easy, nerd.
So
well, let's talk about somebody a little more highfalutin here, Ty. Highfalutin and a bit disappointing.
Okay, wait. You're gonna say highfalutin after calling me a nerd?
Yeah. What? I'm a word aficionado. What do you want me to do?
That's like a nerd.
No. If I say aficionado, that it cancels out nerd. Or this is like some
if you
other version of Frasier. We are the Niles and Frasier in another world.
So you need to be like a word roughneck. That's where you need to go with that.
Okay, let's just move on to Aaron Schunk, the roughneck of Colorado, the next disappointing prospect, because after Homeboy got drafted, he came out with a really bad season at high A, where he was about the same age as the average guys. And the reason why I'm talking about age a little bit here is because it's important when you're talking about progression of a career. The guy played high A. He needs to be at double A right now, or sorry. He needs to be at double A. He's going to play this year at age 24, double A, and then finish the year at triple A. But he could not get a 700 OPS, could not bat over 250, 224 average. And there was power nowhere. So what is it that we're doing other than being concerned about a worse than 4-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio here, Ty? This could absolutely, by the end of this year, Aaron Schunk could be a droppable, and could be. This doesn't mean do it. This means he could be a droppable asset. Certainly somebody I would be looking to trade away from right now instead of invest in. I'm not looking for the buy low on this college bat.
No, I mean, if you see on my list, Robbie, I didn't even rank them. I did the old click, deleted, and it wasn't, a guy that I'm into in any way. This is a college bat showing that his bat wasn't really collegiately positive.
It was just like a fortunate second-round draft pick, really, and you go to Colorado, and that's what happens.
They're just like, hey, we signed for $5. Cool. Yeah, we're in. Right? That's kind of one of those scenarios. But jumping ahead, Dewal Lugo, your former Blue Jays hand at one point. This is a guy that, again, in Detroit, murdered by the depth situation. I don't see a realistic shot here to see him this year without some injuries, or to get some significant time, I should say. We didn't really see him in 2021. And I'm not even sure that he's under contract, to be 100% honest with you. So that's the last time we saw him was in 2020. And I'm not seeing contract status anywhere. So we might be sans Dewal Lugo at this point. I'm gonna have to look that up while you move on to the next guy, because I was unaware that he had fallen off the face of the earth.
Sure. Well, we can talk about World Series champion Ari Adrazina, who was with Atlanta last year, and this is he'll play this year at 32 years old, just a bench bat. And the reason why, like, I get it if you're like, what's going on? Why are you talking about guys who, have never had 400 career MLB at bats in this? Well, it's because we're still in the 50s, guys. We're not at all yet talking about the future cornerstones of your third base selection. And that goes right in line with Harold Castro, 26-year-old. I think he'll play this year at 27. These are guys who are just out there getting some at bats, so they can be in your deep leagues. They can be your bench bats. If you're talking about prospect guys that are bits of projects, you got like AJ Vukovich with Arizona, and that's one of those next guy up, like the developing team. And what's going on with him? Well, he's doing the same thing we talked about with a lot of the other guys, and it's going to be like that for a little bit longer in this episode. But you get to an Evan Longoria, you get to a successful guy, a guy who was a stud. He's just at the end of that road, and we're really hoping that we can get some more out of him. Squeeze that last ounce of baseball, as Moneyball's the line from Moneyball would be, to just get that last ounce of baseball out of him. And maybe that's 2022 baseball. Evan Longoria still with the Giants, and this, I think, Ty, would be, the final year we could have any reasonable expectation. It's so unfortunate that last year he got hurt, because Longoria was having a good season. 261 average. How many at bats did he have last year? 253 before he went out. And I think he was just getting better. And 13 dingers last year. It's just unfortunate, because he hadn't been terrible, but he just hadn't been an 800 plus OPS guy since 2016.
So I found where Dewal Lugo ended up. He ended up back in Mexico.
There we go.
With John Singleton and Kenice Vargas, for those of you that remember that one.
Well, Singleton's back in the bigs.
Yep. Adrian Gonzalez also a part of this. But the best part of this discovery is that I'm looking up, and I did the translation of the Mexican team website, and in the home run column, the word 15 is not the number 15, the word. Thank you, Google Translate. You crushed it. But it does appear that Dewal Lugo was also assigned to whatever the Mexican minor league team is underneath of that team. So that is not a great direction for Dewal Lugo. But yeah, let's jump back ahead here. Harold Castro in Detroit, very similar to this conversation we just had with Dewal Lugo. Depth, not really stealing any at bats from the rest of the infield. The incumbent Spencer Torkelson's coming. There's going to be less at bats in Detroit this season for anybody coming up. The obvious addition of Javier Baez is going to impact that. Harold Castro is, to me, nothing more than a waiver wire pickup. I don't have him ranked. I just see him going the same way. I see him as depth at best. I don't know if you see something different, Robbie. I know you love to own these guys on the cusp of stealing at bats from people, so
Well,
I'll let
that's all
you
it
run
is.
with it.
That's all it is. He's got the ability to potentially get some at bats this year in his age 28 season, and from there, who knows? So that's why he is. And I mean, we're really far back. We're really far back in the rankings. Like I said, you got
100%.
Evan Longoria up, and then you got a guy like Hunter Dozier, who was just brutal last year. 487 at bats for Dozier, a 216 average, 680 OPS, and I kind of feel like nobody should be looking for him. Yes, he had 16 dingers. 3-1 strikeout to walk ratio. None of it's good. Hunter Dozier should definitely be replaced in Kansas City this year coming up. And it could be Bobby Witt that does it. Whatever. Could be Mondesi. It just not Dozier for fantasy relevance. And if you got him, I got to say, you got to move him like now, yesterday. Get rid of this guy.
I will say this. I think there's an outside shot for some value here. As long as you're not walking into it an expectation of killing it in any of the percentage categories, right? Like if you think this is a guy that's going to help you in batting average, OBP, or OPS, then you're fooling yourself. But there is some power numbers here, and there is some counting stats here. So think as a roto bench guy, I could see some value there. Just as a guy to plug in here and there, a depth guy to replace injury later. But I'm with you in terms of the starting role. I'm not rolling in with Hunter Dozier anywhere either. Just a guy that I think could sneak some value. Very similar to our next guy, Matt Duffy, who we saw a really nice run at the beginning of last season. A lot of hits, playing time. That's over. So Matt Duffy is just a guy that's been haunted by injuries his entire career. There's still some baseball there, right? There could be some, still late career resurgence, still just 31. And the guy can hit. Like, he can hit. Is he going to drive balls out of the yard? He is not. But this is a guy that is definitely a flexible option, 3 positions. He's still a free agent. I would look for him to hook on potentially to somebody that's looking at infield depth like the Yankees. This would be an interesting ad for them. The aforementioned Red Sox could potentially bring in a guy like this, and there's countless others. But, just a really good right-handed stick off the bench that can play 3 infield positions. That's the kind of guy that you want to have. I would put my money on, if he's not with those 2 teams in the AL, that he finds himself in the NL for the versatility. I think that is a big piece. And that's pre-DH, which we're all assuming is coming. But that's the way I feel on Duffy. I own him in a couple spots just because he gives me a reliable depth piece. That's what I like.
Yeah, that's what he is. He's a guy who's potentially going to help you at times. Tyler Nevin, very similar situation with Baltimore. It's not a high class situation as far as like somebody is definitely going to take the third base position in Baltimore. So it's up for grabs. There are a few guys there. Tyler Nevin is now amongst that crew. He did have a little bit of time last year with Baltimore. He had a solid season at AAA as well, and he'll enter next year at age 25. And this is the time. We did talk about him on the last podcast because we were I made that error on the last one, having somebody else on Pittsburgh that wasn't there, or something, whatever it was, doesn't matter. Colorado prospect, right? So Nevin might be the exception to the rule of Colorado prospects, and thankfully for him, he's not in Colorado for that purpose. But again, we're not seeing a ton of power with Nevin. It's going to be an average guy, and ideally, cut down on the strikeouts. But the AL beast is going to find a way to keep him off the ball. So he's going to have to do all he can to choke up and, slap that ball around a little bit more. I don't have high hopes for counting stats or anything for Nevin, which is one of the reasons why actually both of us ranked him 47 and he finished 45. So interesting. Starting to get into some players now. Colin Moran's the next guy up, Ty.
The only thing I want to touch on really quick is I do think there's the potential for some late blooming power with Nevin. His dad was very similar, right? So if you look at the first couple seasons for Nevin, cup of coffee, 2 home runs, 120 at bats, 8 home runs, but then 250, 237, 383, 9, 8, and 24. And then he had back-to-back seasons of 31 and 41, which were his peaks. But I do think there's potential for him to grow into some home runs. That's the only thing I wanted to say on Tyler Nevin.
If that happened, that'd be a great outcome for him then. I think.
Well,
'cause
you have a track
time's there.
record, right? Yeah, like you just have a historical framework, and Tyler and Phil are very similar frames of human beings. So Colin Moran is a guy we love to love and then hate, right? I think that's maybe the way to say that. Like we all know there's some moments where Colin Moran is a stud, and then for whatever reason, he's kind of like that Homer Simpson meme that just slowly fades into the bush. He's the fantasy version of that because he's there and then he's just not, and no one knows where he went. He just is no longer really crushing baseballs. But yet Pittsburgh rolls him out there every game, all the time. And that
When
is
healthy.
coming. Yeah,
When-
and that is
when
coming to a
healthy, yeah.
close for sure because they're getting actual guys that can play baseball at a higher level coming through their system. I don't know. To me, if you're owning Colin Moran, like he is a bench guy, and you should be exiting your ownership of Moran because his time in the sun is ending until he hooks on with another really bad team. So
Yeah, his value right now, Ty, is the fact that he has penciled in playing time.
mhm.
And that's it. And it's going to end exactly like you just said. So if you're able to do a 2-for-1 deal where, you're Moran and a prospect of some note, you could possibly get someone who has more assured future within that the organization that you're trading for, for the player that you're trading for. So like the next guy up, I would be all over a 2-for-1, or sorry, no, not the next guy up, 2 guys up, the next guy up. If you're ready, you let me know.
The only thing I wanted to add really quickly, Robbie, before we jumped off of Moran was just I wanted to look at the career splits just to see if there was any patterns, and there really isn't as much of a dip outside of May, June, and then fade into October. So it's really not notable, but just not enough consistent at bats to your point. So less of a point than I thought it was going to be. So I'll leave it there. But getting back on there. Alejandro Mojica for sure is going to impact that Colin Moran conversation. This is a guy that's part of that resurgent in the Pirate system. He's not quite there yet, obviously a young guy, but there's still time for him to be repressed and his contract to be extended, or what Pittsburgh was early to the Pittsburgh was the early dog to the arbitration extension. Right, like they were the organization that really pushed that envelope, even though they didn't do it at scale like Tampa has done. They did get there, but we did see a slight regression in 2021. 2019 was really strong, 351 batting average, 1048 OPS in 174 at bats. We saw 287 last year.
Dominican Summer League, Ty. That's what that was, and then he came over, started playing against grown men who were at minimum 4 years older than him. The adjustment
just because you
right?
expect the Dominican Summer League to be younger does not mean that those birth certificates are accurate. So do not take that for granted.
It's true. Okay, it's true. It's true. Yeah, no, that's true. But the only reason I wanted to just specify that is that now he's learning against peers, but they are still much older than him. So even if the stat line regresses, know that the raw tool set is still there, and you've got to be able to give him time. And he's one of those guys that's not going to be up when he's 21. That's all it is. So play this year
100%.
at 19, and he's going to slow down. Somebody who could be, though, Ty, could be up sooner than later. Jordan Walker with St. Louis last year.
Can I make one last point on Mojica, just because we're on third base? This is a first baseman at the end of the day. I don't see him as a major leaguer at third. He's 6'1", 250. Like, that's not going to fit the way they expect people to play third base today. So I would expect him to shift over. That's all. I just wanted to hammer that in.
Yeah, no. Jordan Walker started last year. A-ball, finished high A, split the season, but 2/3 of it was at high A, and the guy was great. 292 average at high A, 831 OPS, and amongst for the season, 14 dingers, 14 stolen bases. Strikeout to walk was a little better than 3-1, but manageable, I would say still. And the strikeout percentage under 30%, all great signs. And he will play this year at 20. So this is a teenager doing this in pro ball, 2 levels. I know it's St. Louis, but I like that.
If you go back to our 2020 draft coverage, you'll hear me drool over Jordan Walker. And if you do go back, hit us up on Twitter and tell us what we said about Jordan Walker. The way I recall it, I was very excited about him. And I remember saying, I just think all the tools are here for him to be an absolute stud. And we're starting to see that, to your point, of what we saw last season. You gotta love anytime you see a 4-digit OPS. A real solid season, right? Probably, I think we should hope for an aggressive spot at AA this year. I think that would be the dream, and we want to see AA success here, right? Like that's what we'd really like to see. The problem that creates, though, is it puts pressure on St. Louis to figure out where they're going to put him, because the third base spot's really blocked. He's just 19, so I really think as a result we're going to see him at high A one more time to start. We might see him move to AA really quickly, but if he goes to AA immediately, then you should be excited, because that means they have a different plan for him.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm not exactly sure how the lockout is going to work with the minor league guys, because I know they're all still able to do what they've got to do. So it's entirely possible that we could be having a regular minor league start.
That's a good point. I never thought about that.
They may not be affected by the things that the MLB and the 40-man roster guys are. So who
would know that? Who can we call out to tell us this?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't know if Fast would be the guy. He works for MLB. Maybe we need to talk to old Fast about this.
Let's just tag all of the industry and say, who knows this question?
Yeah. Will minor league ball still start despite the MLB lockout? And it makes sense that minor league ball will in fact still start, because during NHL lockouts, which is the most relevant ones that I can think of, you still had the ECHL playing, and I believe the AHL played as well.
Question is, can you hold Chris Bryant in the minors any longer?
Yeah, that would be. This is what they were talking about. This is what Theo Epstein was talking about. You got it. This is why you hold the guy back. Anyway, somebody else who we once thought was going to be a breakout beast, and now appears to be at the point in which he needs to develop the power or the other set of tools required, is Miguel Geraldo, with the Blue Jays only going to be entering his age 21 years. So still, and I assume he finished the year at A-ball. I think he's going to be right back at A-ball, but still years away in Toronto now from coming up, and power was lacking. Still has not yet to have 10 in any pro season, 250 average last year. But the thing with him was that in 19, he had this great year of a 300 average and double-digit stolen bases. Again, the power wasn't there; it was 10, but he had 29 extra base hits. This was between rookie and A-ball. He repeated A-ball, but it's in Lansing. Was it Lansing? No, it was Dunedin this time. Sorry, I forgot. Lansing is now part of Oakland, so my apologies. But he repeated A-ball, and the numbers just weren't better the full season. So we need to see some of that movement for him. But again, middling prospect, and the potential is there. So I'll add. Go ahead, Robbie. I just had Walker and Geraldo similar, but the more I've been diving in, the more I've been thinking, well, the reason that I have him is that I think Walker's going to be slow played, but I'm also banking on Toronto testing Geraldo. And if that doesn't happen, then I think it's, of the two prospects, 99 out of 100 people should take Walker from this point forward.
Yeah. If you're looking at like prospect value, period, it's for sure Walker. It's not even close. But what I'll say about Geraldo is that I do believe he's going to be dangled either before the season, whenever this offseason kicks back in, or at the trade deadline. I would expect him to be a guy. All of the reports, all of the scouting reports on Miguel Geraldo talk about how he's one of those guys that makes really hard contact all the time.
Right.
So it hasn't translated into the home runs yet. But there's people that are very excited about this kid. So to me, this is one of the guys that I talk about all the time. And, you hear it all over the internet these days. You buy the dip. This is a buy the dip kind of guy. You buy him under the expectation. Robbie, you've seen me do this in 100 leagues where I buy the guy that gets traded. I do it all the time. I'm pretty good at it. And Geraldo is going to be one of those guys. Rasmussen was a guy that we talked about that falls into that category.
Rasmussen. I know it looks like that's the right way. It's not. It's Rasmussen.
I'm never ever calling him Rasmussen ever.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he's
Drew.
Rasmussen.
We're sorry. Drew. We're sorry.
But you know what? If he punches a guy out and then kicks out the feet, I'm here for that.
And then you're gonna be like, rah, rah, Rasmussen. that's a different guy. That's a different guy,
but yeah, I think just to end it here, like Geraldo, buy low. He's going to be really cheap in your deeper leagues, so go get him. He's absolutely worth the flyer. I think the power will come 25 pop at major league level if he gets there. So worth the risk for what you would have to give up for him. Jumping ahead, guy that I think's coming back in a lot of lists, and for good reason. There's been some stalling at the upper levels, and that's Shirt and Apostle. I think the offseason signings kind of confirm the concerns in Texas, right? Like if you're Shirt and Apostle and you're like, yeah, I haven't played all that well, and then boom, you've got Simeon and Seeger now blocking infield at bats. You're certainly not going to take them from Josh Jung. There's concern here. I mean, I'm not sure what we can expect out of him this season. We saw him get a cup of coffee, 20 at bats last season. Didn't go well. Struck out in almost half of them, right? So between him and what's his face in center field, Tavares, there's a lot of breeze in that new ballpark. So this is a guy that I was never in on. 6'4", 235, has the frame to be a guy, but I'm not that excited about Shirt and Apostle. It never was, and I'm still not. Robbie, are you a little more hopeful than I am?
No, realistically, I'm not. It's just that he's on the cusp right now and only entering his age 22 season, and he was a power guy in 19. So depending on what you want to take from last year, there's a lot of rebound potential. And even though Texas has added free agents, notable free agents, it doesn't mean that they're not still going to have at bats for a guy like Apostle. As time moves on, it's a matter of what he does with it. And last year he moved, I think it was 3 levels. So injury riddled season. He didn't get to play a whole lot, but this is a power bat. And if he's not going to be a power bat, then he's not going to be in Texas and he's going to be a lost cause. But again, we are at our 40th ranked dynasty shortstop with MLB production over the next 5 years. What did I say? First base? One of them.
Well, I mean, Apostle is probably likely profiling at first base, if not the outfield. So I think that's an appropriate slip. But, at the end of the day,
just the fact, Ty, it was just the fact that like we're still talking about guys who are only going to have a short window, not consistent 5-year guys here, right? And some of it's because they're prospects, and some of it's because they're at the end of the rope. And then you've got those guys like Apostle who are in between, who you just don't know what's the reason. Can you expect 1,000 major league at bats over the next 5 years from him? I don't know.
Yep. Well, and we can count on him being in the World Baseball Classic as he's a member of the Kraken team. So we'll hear about him at the very least at that
thank
level.
Goodness. I'm glad that's still going.
So jumping at a guy that just seems to keep surviving the cleanse of removing players that should be stealing at bats. Maikel Franco is still here on the list, and I think Robbie, I think it's safe to say for both of us, the only reason he exists on this list is because people continue to run him out there.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's going to be with Washington this year coming up, and last year 11 dingers, 210 batting average, and 377 at bats with Baltimore. Prior to that, he had a full season with KC, and it was super disappointing from a power standpoint. He only had 8 dingers, but the average was good, and that's why we were talking about him last year and saying, well, this might be a guy, like this might be a time for somebody to make a big move. And he did not do that at all. He fell kind of flat on his face. And, sometimes you take a chance on a guy and you're like, well, if he moves here, like to a team that's going to play him, and if he's around a couple of guys that are good hitters in the lineup, well, then he could walk into, runs, RBIs. And that's just not what has happened with Franco.
Do you know where I think he could be really valuable, but they will never put him?
Mexican League.
No, in Washington is what I meant. Ahead of Juan Soto, because I think he's the kind of guy that needs to be pitched to, because the strikeout rates are, and they're not out of control by any means, but they're certainly there's a little bit of chase on the contact side. So it's one of those things that I think if you were to force teams to know Juan Soto's behind him, I think he'd run into a lot more home runs, right? And he did have a little, right? He did have a little bit of success early on in his career when he had big bats around
consistent
him, right?
20 dinger guy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think if he was ever find himself in a scenario like that again, I think we could see really small stretches of good power again. But beyond that, like there's no other value here with Maikel Franco. A guy that I think fits the mold a little bit next on our list here, Miguel Andujar. Yeah, that Miguel Andujar, the guy that was
Yeah.
once a stud and is now a dud. We don't know what to expect from Andujar. Like, I don't know what the Yankees are going to do with him, because, like, on one hand, if he gets at bats, you're like, okay, maybe this guy hits some home runs. But what indication do we have that we're going to see him at all with any reasonable opportunity to power? I don't know what you think here.
Like, I think he's got a good hit tool, and that's the fun part, is that he could be a good player. It's just that with the Yankees, he's kind of buried. So what's reasonable to expect? Like, what did he have last year? 154 at bats last year. He was hurt. He had 54 on a rehab assignment. So 208 at bats total for the year. AAA raked, dominated, MLB league average type guy, 253 hitter, which I guess we talked about before, puts him in the top third of guys. But that's kind of the fun of him, is that you just don't know what's going to happen. But one thing I will say is this isn't the guy that we saw in 18 when he had his big breakout year.
No,
this is just a guy, a filler.
And we're in a stretch of guys here that are guys that are going to be having at bats for sure, but very few of them are going to be relevant. So, Robbie, I think it's safe to say we can jump through a couple of these guys. Jake Burger is a guy that's going to be depth fodder in Chicago with the White Sox.
Alberto, same thing.
Yep. The upside to Burger is maybe Moncada gets hurt. Like, that's the only thing, but he's also going to have to compete with potential free agents still, and Yolbert Sanchez, who we talked about last week. Ahead of him, Isaac Paredes in Detroit, kind of the same thing, depth in Detroit. He's definitely savagely hurt by the Javi Baez signing, but could still see some at bats at third. Gio Urshela, I think, is a good rebound candidate. I think there's some potential for Urshela to jump ahead and back into it. I don't know how many people feel about that, but the power is certainly there. We could even see him at shortstop this season, which could be increasing the value there. Brett Beatty is a guy that's just not there yet, but I think everybody is excited to see in New York. This is a first-round pick. Robbie, you got something there?
So here are our prospects: 30, 31, 32, 33. Miguel Vargas with the Dodgers, Rhys Hines with Cincinnati, Cody Jose with the Dodgers, and Brett Baty with the Mets. All had crappy 2021 seasons. All of them disappointed. You had guys like Hines, who were slated, even by myself, predicted to have good jumps up and become like top 100 prospects. Cody Jose did not make it come together. Brett Baty, Baty's the youngest, I think, of this group.
And had the best season.
I was going to say maybe Vargas is, yes. And the problem is that Baty is furthest away from their depth charts. But the other guys, it wasn't coming together like it's supposed to. And that's why they are as far. Yes. And that's why they're as far back as they are. Cody Jose as a college draft pick, this was not a great year for him to come out but a great year for him.
I don't know how many times we have to say this before people start listening to us, Robbie, but like, stop drafting high school bats. Like, stop doing it.
Right.
It's a waste of time. And they very rarely pan out outside of the first 4 or 5 picks, right? Like, it's just not a great, history here. Brett Baty's the guy in this group for me. Like, it's not even close. I think there's the farthest upside there. We still have many years before we're going to see him at the pro level, but this is a guy that you should be excited about, and you should be trying to position yourself to own jumping ahead here. Brian Anderson on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. No profile hype, just kind of a guy. And frankly has fought injury. But I will say this, Brian Anderson is a guy that I think is very underappreciated. And because of the injuries, I think most people have forgotten about Brian Anderson. There's some upside here.
Healthy Brian Anderson's a good player. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, these are the kind of guys that'll win you a championship without you knowing it, right? Like, the kind of guy that give you right field at bats that you just didn't expect to give you, 20 home runs. And that's the difference between a championship. Sometimes you have this guy to come off the bench, and we'll probably still see him a little bit at third base this year, here and there. But I do think fighting a wrist injury, I believe last season, we should see 15 to 20 home runs again here. So just as a guy to get late or to acquire cheap, definitely worth looking at. Ahead of him, Isaac, unless you want to touch on Brian.
Nope. Isaiah Kiner Falafa. This is strictly stolen base average guy, and the average isn't high. It's expect somewhere in the 270 to 285 range, which is fine, but there's no power. So if he is in fact a Texas third base type guy, because remember 2 years ago, Ty, the whole thing was he's a catcher, but he's also stealing bases and this and that. Well, now he's not a catcher anymore. So now he's a powerless, low run, low RBI, because he's probably going to be at the back of the order with Tech. We'll see. But he's only entered age 27 season. And 2 years ago, I cut him in a league in which I will still be paying a cap hit of him this for not being on my team this year. But it's stolen bases and a mild average bump. And I'm okay with just passing on a guy like that when I'm looking for a bit more impact out of third base. Now, if he's second base, more valuable, sure.
See, I'm gonna make a little bit of a different. We saw 74 runs scored last year for Falafa, and I think we're gonna see a bounce back to that number, if not an increase. Because to your point about him hitting near the back of that lineup, when
If
that
that's
lineup
where he
turns,
hits, yeah.
well, I think it's a reasonable spot looking at that lineup. I kind of agree with you. I assume we're going to see Josh Jung at some point this season.
Yeah.
We might see Falafa catching again because that
Oh, come on. They do have a terrible catching situation. I'll say that.
I tease. Yeah, he might be center fielder this year. You never know. But the point I'm trying to get at is that him and Dalton for our show can start what's the group? What do we call? What's the word I'm looking for? Support group together for catchers turned center fielders.
Right.
But at the end of the day, here, if he's batting 9, I like his value for those runs, like big time. So stolen bases, runs. Think about that, Robbie. Like after watching a year, Marcus Semien, if Simeon's hitting lead off, which is potentially the way Texas will play that.
That's why my fear is that he's 9th, Ty. That's my fear.
Why is that a fear though?
Well, because he's going to lose one at bat every game.
No, but think about this though, right? So if he's hitting 9 and he's stealing bases and Marcus Simeon's getting fastballs, that's a phenomenal scenario.
It is, but the exact same argument was made against Nick Madrigal because he was a number 9 hitter with the White Sox last year. So I am picking and choosing who I'm going to say it's okay to be a number 9 hitter. Ooh. And with Isaiah,
this is a Twitter poll. Who scores more runs? Who scores more runs in 22? It's a great Twitter poll.
But Madrigal's going to be the number 1 hitter for the. I'll put it up at Dinger's Pod.
But it's a great poll though, because nobody thinks like this, Robbie. No one thinks about the 9-hole run advantage that you can get if you have
an effective leadoff and second hitter. I agree,
which
because
Texas
you can turn
is have. I agree,
and it's really at this point, Ty, it's only been an AL conversation, except for 2020 when we didn't have pitchers because of the AL the East and the Central and the West all playing each other over and over again.
This could be the great debate of 2022. Who scores more runs, Falafel or Madrigal, right? So jump it up here. Yandy Diaz, the guy that, he works out harder than you do on your fantasy team. But at the end of the day, we saw a little bit of maybe this guy could do more at the end of last season. We saw a little hint of this could be a better baseball player than we're used to seeing on our fantasy rosters. Don't fall for that trap. This is a guy that's just going to give you contact tool, and that's it. There's nothing else here. Don't get lost in the fact that he has Eric Thames style frame. This is it. There's nothing else there. And the odds are, if there's 2 guys that I'm concerned with in Tampa, it's Choi and Diaz. They're probably at the very least platoon guys, but I don't see them as starters anymore, right? I think that team is evolving. I think they've got young superstars, and it's time to move on from those 2 corner guys. Do you see a different at-bat total for Diaz this season?
No, he was over 400 last year. I think that's going to be a peak area for him. 400 would be safe. You're not going to see 550. He's not going to be handed third base. They did free up some more at-bats, but I don't think that was to give to him. I think that was for guys like Brouillon and the rest of the crew that are going to be moving around. And to the point, and also to get to our number 26 ranked guy with Patrick Wisdom. Wisdom came in last year with the Sox and just went dingers for days, right? And then really, really bottomed out because all of a sudden, like you have said a million times, Ty, the guys come in, they get fed fastballs and they hammer them. And then everyone's like, oh my God, this guy's so good. Patrick Wisdom then had a big adjustment to make and finished the year okay. Yandy Diaz will not go 8 straight days with a home run for you. That's not who he is. So don't think you're going to get peaks and valleys. Just think of Yandy Diaz as a safe guy to have in your lineup. But if it's daily, you're going to need to check the lineup to make sure he's likely going to be in it.
And the other part too with Wisdom too is like assuming he doesn't have that same bottom out, like he's going to get an almost full season at bats, right?
Which would
That's
be
the reality.
Crazy, right? Like like in the leagues where people had him before, I think Roto Ronnie actually had him in our big money auction league, because he was picking guys up that had a lot of dingers in 2019 in AAA and just like taking a chance, like Dermis Garcia with the Yankees, and he had Wisdom and somebody else. And I remember thinking during our Rule 5 draft, because that league is so complex that we have a Rule 5 and all these other things, like I should take one of these big boppers just because. And that was all it was, right? Like no real thought to it. Just like, well, the guys have
one
power.
of them off my roster.
Well, that's what I did this year, because of last year not doing it.
Yeah.
So, but I was like Patrick, because he's not young. He was 30 last year. He'll be playing this year at age 31. But if he's an everyday third baseman with the White Sox, there could be 30 dinger power here, and it might be a 230, 40 average, something like that. That's okay, right? We talked about that on the last episode with first baseman. You have to figure out where the value lies with you. What's your honest expectation if you're not getting a top 10 guy, right?
Exactly.
Top 10 guy, you're wanting to get as many categories covered as you can. If it's points, you're wanting to get 3.3 points or more. But if it's less, if you're getting them lower, Patrick Wisdom's probably a really good guy. Now, of course, last year he just emerged, so everybody's excited about him. So you got to be careful with overpaying for him. But there'll be deals out there.
Do you know what I love? Do you know what I love? Patrick Wisdom, 20-team leagues. Love Patrick Wisdom in that format because I think less people are going to be hyped about him. And I think he's going to give you at bats with the power totals that maybe are going to be underappreciated in a smaller format. So just a quick note for those of you in 20-team leagues. I like that buying power that's going to be there. A guy that got caught red-handed last year cheating, Colton Walker, I think is going to be the third baseman this year.
And he had a hell of a year for a guy that spent half of it suspended.
Yeah. I mean,
4 levels, rookie, high A, triple A, and then finished the year. I think he finished the year with the Rockies.
He did. And he hit a sparkling 189. How you do? But this is a guy that literally is going to be gifted an opportunity. He was almost gifted it last year until he shot himself in the foot, a la Plaxico Burress. But this is a scenario.
No. Plaxico Burress shot himself in the foot.
Is that putting a needle in your foot for performance purposes isn't the same thing?
Between the toes, thinking that's how they checked for drugs. No, we need a blood test. What? Oh, dude.
Oh, man, what are you doing? You're doing it wrong.
Honestly, Ty, I feel like, so when we look back at this, right, and you look at how his season went, he got to play basically half a year, and he spent it flying through the minors, basically just Colorado, making sure he was in game shape, right? Get him up to AAA. And then, okay, now you're going to go play the rest of the year. You only got 52 games in last year. He easily could have had 350 at bats with the Rockies if he didn't screw himself over. And I'm sure he's pissed off a few fantasy owners out there because he's a 20 headed into this year. He'll play this year at 24, headed in as a 24-year-old with what looks like a pretty crappy season. But if you know what happened, which is that he got caught cheating, and hopefully that wasn't the only reason people cared at all about him. But this is a guy who's supposed to be crazy high average, and power can develop. And it's all Colorado, so the average should stick, right?
Yeah,
so then it's a matter of the power. Yeah. And that's why he's
the
not
guy
top 20 for us, but he's in the 20s because that potential does exist still.
There's nobody I'm more excited about in the Rockies system beyond Zach Veen. So for me, I just think this is the best bat they have right now. That's saying a lot because they have a couple major league tools that are good. But I do think this is the best bat that they have right now at the upper minors. So I'm buying him everywhere. I own him in a lot of spots, so I will continue to own him. Just a guy that I think is really undervalued right now. I think that's the big takeaway from this. Eduardo Escobar, 33, also very undervalued. Robbie, you have him at 31. I'm at 20. I just see a great signing here by the Mets. Like, I think the Mets did a couple really good things. They got boring guys, right? The Mets are notorious for splashy all the time.
Finally.
Yeah.
I mean, Max Scherzer is not boring, but
he kind of is, though, outside of fantasy performance. Like, he's not a very like interesting guy. Like, you don't really know if he's looking at home plate or whether he's
got two different colored eyes. How that's fascinating.
Well, you missed I was gonna say, or if he's a husky. Like, you didn't you didn't let me finish my joke.
Or if he's a husky. Okay, I apologize.
So at the end of the day, though, Escobar, switch hitter here, a little bit of pop, a little bit of hit tool. Great ad for the Mets, in my opinion. The only downside for Escobar is that he's gonna have to beat out Robinson Cano in spring training, who is making some noise in the Winter League, enough to get you a little bit excited if you were one of those poor souls like me that has Robinson Cano somewhere on a roster, and you're just
I saw that, Ty. I saw that you have him, and I'm like, what? And the funny thing is that I was like, well, if he is actually back, they're gonna play him
100%. Right? And that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, what do I have to lose? Like, that league I'm rebuilding, right? Like, I completely tore down my roster in that league. So I have literally nothing to lose by holding on to Robinson Cano. And to be fair, I did try to trade him. No one wanted him. So I'm like, yeah, I'll hold him, whatever.
And now you're in a better position because there will be 100%. Teams who are looking for a starting second baseman. And you're like, hi, Robinson Cano.
That's right. I'm happy to trade him. Jumping up here, Jordan Groshans is a guy that I think fits into the category we were talking about earlier, just in terms of the opportunity to buy Miguel Geraldo type guy in the Toronto system. Groshans a guy that a lot more people are high on, but he didn't have a great season last year either. Battled some injury, and the Jays are clearly tweaking something here for me, Robbie. This is a guy that I've watched very closely. One guy that I'm very, very, very high on. But they did some interesting things in terms of at bats. Like, he didn't get regular at bats last season. Like, they were pulling him in and out of lineups. And I don't know if he was maybe battling an injury behind the scenes that we don't know about, or if they were making a change to his swing. But the power is here. The upside is here. Everything you want from a major league prospect is here. In last year, we just saw a bit of a struggle, but the batting average was still there, 291. I think for me, most people are just going to be alarmed by the power. Right, just 7 home runs. Power, just 7 home runs, but at 817 OPS still is promising. This is a guy that, like, if you're looking for an upper level prospect to go invest into, I think Grosjean is going to be a value buy right now. He's going to probably start at AAA just because the Jays want to push some of these guys with their window kind of opening here. They're going to want all their talent at the upper levels for 2 reasons. One, maybe they're trading them, but also, and more importantly, just in case they need them. So I think Groshans is going to get pushed this year, and it should open up the door for Geraldo, who we talked about earlier as well. So just a quick note there. I had a guy go in the opposite direction, Nick Solak, a once promising prospect guy that we all thought, I think, could do some things. Is the time over for Nick Solak, Robbie? Like, are we all out at this point? Because there's just been a lot of disappointment here.
Well, so here's the issue with Solak. There isn't a lot of power. He does steal some bases, but we've talked about before, I think it was with the shortstop episode, where if you're counting stolen bases and home runs, a superstar is going to have 60 or more. A decent fantasy relevant player, not like impactful, but like a relevant guy, is going to be flirting with 30 between the two. And then you get to guys who are at the 20 mark. Well, Solak's under the 20 mark for both of those. And his average is not 270. He's a 240, 250 type hitter. So none of what he's doing is helping you win. But sometimes what he can provide you is a little bit of a bump when other superstars that you may have, if you're an Aaron Judge guy, a Jose Ramirez guy, when they're slumping, he can help to kind of keep you in a week, not win you, not at all win you. but he can keep you in a week. And that's the only reason why, for me, he's holding in at 22 in our rankings. And that could change this year. He's only entering his age 27 season. He has established himself about, what are we for career at bats? 783 career at bats right now, 257 hitter at this moment. But last year was 242. So if you want to say, well, it's a tick down, sure. Okay, it's a tick down. What I want to see from him is 10 home runs, 10 stolen bases, because that tells me he can actually help me. Because if you have 26 fantasy weeks in a season, you need a guy to be getting you, 13 steals, 13 stolen bases, so that each week, ideally, he's providing you with one of those in a week if you're doing a weekly head-to-head. Now, if it's Roto, sure, I think the same rule applies. You want to be getting some usefulness from him, and Solak is on the cusp of losing his ability to help you.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that if you pull up the MLB.com depth chart for the Texas Rangers, which I always suggest is the one you look at because there's always some sneaky clues in this list for whatever reason. But Nick Solak
MLB.com?
Yeah, depth chart. I always get sneaky little hints at who's going to win starting jobs here.
Sorry, the only reason I was saying that is because I thought that they had removed all of their players, but maybe MLB.com is not the same one that I'm thinking of, where the official MLB site had removed all. Remember that? That happened as soon as the lockout happened. They removed all their players. All the guys that are on 40-mans all had to be removed, like legal reasons.
I don't recall that, but I do know for that MLB.com is a separate business vertical.
Right. Yeah. So it's not the one that's
baseball.
Okay.
So maybe those are different. But anyway, point is at the second base position, Nick Solak is ranked 5th on the depth chart.
Really?
Ouch. And that's behind Eli White. That tells you you everything. That is one of the most insulting things you could ever have happen to you as a second baseman. I think there's still potential for him to find some time in left field, which I think is why Solak's going to have some value, especially early on. But for me, if Solak lights the world on fire at any moment in time between the beginning of whatever start date we have this season and June, trade him immediately. Do not wait. Do not hesitate. Get him off your roster with any increase in value you can find. But he's up here for both of us because we both are assuming there's some at-bats here.
Yeah, and potentially not detrimental. That's all.
Correct. Yep, I agree. And ahead of him, Nolan Jones. This is a guy that I'm expecting a big rebound from. And I know a lot of people are out on Nolan Jones. Like, he's really been a guy that went up the hype chart and then way back in the last couple seasons. And for good reason, right? Like, he hasn't, blown the doors off anything here. This is a guy that I just has the eye at the plate. He has the plate discipline. He's a big guy. He's going to continue to go in the frame. He's still just 23, right? So there's nothing to be scared of here. He's still on a lot of high-level lists, right? Heading into last season, 45, 36, 52 across 3 of the major lists. There's enough to be excited about here. He still hit 13 home runs last year. The batting average was a little scary, but Robbie, 356 OBP in what most people would consider a down year. Right. So this is like your kind of guy. But for whatever reason, I like him more than you do.
Well, let me just tell you the pluses of Nolan Jones here. The pluses are that he's had one season above high A, and that was last year, and that was a AAA full season. It was not great, but to Ty's point, OBP was there. Power, not great. Again, also not a bomb, right? He didn't hit 140. He didn't strike out 220 times. So he gets to repeat AAA this year. And until the Ramirez trade to Toronto, he will be the third baseman in AAA. And he can just work away at that. And I bet have a heck of a season in AAA. And then when Ramirez is traded, the opportunity should be there for him to come up and either take over third base and just move on. But I honestly think that, like, last year is very forgivable when you look at the fact that, like, he had not played at AA before. He got a full season and just kept getting put out there. He didn't fall apart, right? Like, he wasn't being overmatched, but he was still almost 4 years younger than the average player at that level. So there's a huge adjustment, like monument. You go from playing with your same age peers to playing with men, right? Guys with World Series rings because they were on the 40-man roster but never played, or you know what I mean, right? Like you're playing against wily veterans, and they're also your teammates. He's adjusted. He had the year. Here we go.
Is it too early to add him?
Hello, it's me.
I can confirm it's too early.
Oh, it's never too early.
He's never had a major league at bat.
Anytime I get to use a soundbite, is not too early. I'm sorry.
People have just soured. But somebody on the other side of the list, Ty, is 37-year-old Justin Turner, who had a career high in dingers last year on the Dodgers, returning again, and he's ranked our 20th guy. And Justin Turner is the guy. If you are in win now mode and you do not want to heavily invest in third base, you go get you a prospect, or you probably already have one, but you also have Justin Turner as your guy. And if you could have a Justin Turner, Nolan Jones combo, that's probably amazing.
I love Justin Turner. The hardest part of this list for me was placing Justin Turner. I'm not gonna lie.
How much time do we have left? Right. That's why he is where he is.
Yeah. I just love how he plays the game. He's a grinder. He has tough at bats. Like he's older Josh Donaldson, which is saying a lot because he might have a more youthful body than Josh Donaldson. So it's kind of a funny
huge beard, chains out. Like
yeah.
Justin Turner's just the guy who you can bank on. The next guy who we have ranked one above him, who's about to turn 30, Eugenio Suarez with Cincinnati. Last year, he was my pick for MVP, Ty, because I thought he was moving to shortstop to dominate, and turned out he was moving to shortstop to strike the F out.
It cost Luis Castillo countless runs.
Yeah, people talk about Luis Castillo not having a great year. Well, that's because of Eugenio Suarez not having a great year. But 171 strikeouts, which, I mean, that wasn't even his career high, to 56 walks. And that's in 505 at bats. But he did still manage 31 dingers and a terrible
I want him to sign
average.
A 1-year deal in Toronto so bad because I think he would hit 40 home runs in the Dome. Well, I want to see it so bad.
It could happen. I don't know when he becomes a free agent, but he's only entering his age.
I believe he is a free agent.
No. He's still with Cincinnati.
Oh, he's got the big mega contract. Never mind. Like maybe that's how we get Luis Castillo is we take on the money.
Okay. Do you know what his contract actually is? Like, did he sign some long? Okay.
Yeah, he has a major. Now that I said it out loud, it triggered him. He's on the back end of his 7-year deal.
Is he really?
Through 24, 66 million. But I believe it was backloaded though. I believe a lot of the money's in the last 2 seasons. So
he signed that after 18, probably.
Yeah, like if you're Cincinnati and you're truly going to unload, like you've got Votto and Suarez, Toronto could just send 3 like mediocre prospects, take on Suarez, Votto, and Castillo.
Come on.
Great trade. Let's get it done. Make it happen.
Another sampling of Ty's other podcast, the Blue Jays for Days podcast, which
all day, every day. I have vanity, license plate, everything. Like it's
really?
Yeah. So it says Jays, JAYZ 77, which is excellent because A, that's the first year they were a team, 77. Right. But B, the amount of people that I fool to believe that Jay-Z was born in 1977 is off the charts.
Oh man. Oh geez. Okay. Well, anyway, I don't want to tell anybody my license plates for my vehicles, but I do have one vanity one, but it's got the Canadian flag. But back to Eugenio Suarez. So Ty, I believe that, and I thought really hard about this because this is such a tough one. As Suarez, his power went up, his average was going down, but it was still really good. Like as far as like overall, like 270 average. And then it bottomed out in 2020 and it got worse last year. So when I thought like, oh my God, there's 202 average, that's the worst since his Detroit days in 2014. 40 points worse. 242 was his worst career average. And then last year he had a full season even worse, but he had some bright spots in September, limited albeit, but he's only really able to help you right now in home runs. So how he ended up this high is because I feel like there's a bounce back coming, and not a little one, like a 50, 60 plus average return for him. And if that means he continues to be a 30 dinger guy and that's it, like we're not going to see whatever it was, like 26, 34, 49 kind of progression. Well, actually, sorry, he went in consecutive years, 4 home runs to 13 to 21, 26, 34, 49. And he was still
Like,
good in 2016. He had 15 in that short season. 2020.
like this is a good defensive third baseman. This is a bad defensive shortstop. But are we really surprised that a guy that is a short, stocky guy playing shortstop ran out of gas? Like, are we really surprised by that? No, we're not. And the reality is, I'm with you, Robbie. Like, I think there's a huge average bounce back, and the power's there. Like, this guy can hit bombs. Like, there's no questions about. Like, if I'm starting a slow pitch team, Eugenio Suarez is my first phone call. Him or Bartolo Colon, because I've seen lots of videos of him hitting dingers in slow pitch as well.
Well, you know who I'm going to call, Ty? You know who I'm going to call?
Ghostbusters?
Carter Kieboom. That's who I'm going to call.
Gross.
The 24-year-old Washington Nacional is about to break out. That's right, everybody. I am dying with this one. Last year was a struggle, but again, up and down. Not until the end of the year when they finally gave it out did they allow Kieboom to just do what he got to do. For the year, he was under 400 at bats in between AAA and MLB. 11 dingers, only a stolen base. Strikeout to walk was what was he here? 90 to 50. Yeah, 90 to 50. So better than 2-1, which is okay. But this has got to be the year for him. This will be the one. Do we care at all about him? Because in 2019, his last full season, he had a 300 average in AAA. I think that's who he is. I think he is a high average guy that can provide you with, 15 plus dingers. And I'm the guy who thinks that. Like that that's all I can say, right? Like I just feel like when you give a guy the position and say day in, day out, you're going to get it. This is it. Now, I thought that was last year, right? I was wrong. Luis Garcia, we had the same conversation. But Luis Garcia is also a really good hitter at AAA, and he's also young. So Carter Kieboom only entering age 24. Ty, I'm buying him. And I'm not buying him in small leagues. Let Carter Kieboom be on waivers in your 15 team and under. Unless you have like the infield, you're playing roto and you got like corner infield, middle infield, then maybe he's like a bench guy in that. But realistically, he should be outside the 280 realm. 276, I think, is what we talked about for 30-team leagues. He's a bench guy. Get him to be one of your bench guys. I think it's worthwhile. The upside is absolutely there to be a good third base player.
You know what's crazy, Robbie? And you haven't noticed it yet? Is that
I see
above
it.
you.
You
I rank
have him
above you.
So tell me even more.
I've dumped on him for years, as you know. This is a guy that provided no pop. And what I saw last year was a progression on the power side. He bulked up. There's lots of things that are developing. I'm with you, Robbie. The hit tool is better than we've seen. I agree with that comment. But I think very similar to what I touched on earlier with Tyler Nevin, I think there's some power growth here as well. I think we could see 20 home runs this year. I think we could see 30 the following year. So that's why I bumped him up my list. I see the growth here, and I think he definitely fits into that post-hype conversation. Because I've dumped on him for so long, there's a 0% chance I'm rolling out a soundbite for him. But
not worth a soundbite.
No. I mean, if I had just a white blank screen and no sound, that's what Carter Kieboom would get. But for now, I am optimistic about the upside, and I do think there is some reason to be excited about him moving forward. I'm not selling the farm to get him, but I think the cost to acquire him is very, very low. A guy that I think is going to be just way too overvalued, but is a great baseball player is Abraham Toro in Seattle. Robbie, I know you as the Dipoto fanboy that you are, love Abraham Toro for obvious reasons. This guy's A, he's Canadian, B, great baseball player, and C, he's going to get a lot of at-bats this season. So lots to like about Abraham Toro, but for that reason, for me, I'm out. Like, I actually have him ranked 14th. I think he could end up replacing JP Crawford near the top of that lineup. I think there's a very plausible option at the top because I think he provides one of the best hit tools on that roster. The only difference is JP Crawford probably has the best hit tool, but I do believe Toro has more pop and more versatility. So I think he's going to get that at bat at the top. So that's why I have him ranked up, is I'm projecting him to be the leadoff.
I love that. That would be very excellent. I have him 19th. So he's 17th for us overall. He'll be entering his age 25 season, and he is a amazing AAA player. He hasn't been able to convert it to MLB full-time yet, but once he got traded to Seattle, he was a 252 hitter last year. He did have 5 dingers, abbreviated time, of course, 26 at bats, but he came out of the gate strong and then had a struggle with Seattle. And then in September, when everyone was doing their thing, he was also there doing his thing. And I think Toro is going to be undervalued. You're saying overvalued, maybe overvalued in redraft. But again, when people start to actually just look at the year-end line for him last year, 239 average, 688 OPS, and an OBP of only 318, it's not great. But when you look at the Seattle side, it was a 328 OBP, and there's a little bit of room to work with there. But also 22 walks to 33 Ks once he was a Mariner. Jake Fraley, same thing, was able to get the walks. And that's the coaching. That's MLB level coaching, saying pick your pitch, take your time, get some, take a strike. That's okay. Force them to be where you need to be. And I think that's going to lead to great success for him. I love the idea of him as a leadoff guy. I've got a trade offer out there in a league that we've discussed. We put a pin in it. So I want your thoughts here. Same contract.
Just really quick before we go
Sure.
to that, I just want to make one last comment on Toro, and then we'll go to the trade talk. But the big thing for me is like Toro is very underappreciated, and this is a good thing just to put in the back of your head as a fantasy player, right? Like Toro is behind Bregman, and then he's behind Kyle Seager shortly, right? Like for a short window. So like this is a guy that at no point in his career has had a pathway ever, right? So these are the kind of guys like Patrick Wisdom and Frank Schwindel and these guys that can kind of come out of nowhere. Now, it's not a power guy per se. He's a little more balanced, but I like a 750 OPS with a 280 type batting average. That's what I'm looking for here. So I see that at the top. But go ahead, Robbie. Pitch the trade here.
So it'll be 5 years of each guy at the same amount of money.
Okay.
Right? So that's how much he can get from the contract side. 1-for-1. Abraham Toro, Jose Urquidy. What side are you on?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Jose Urquidy, for anyone starting pitcher with Houston, looks like he's SP3, SP4 kind of depth chart.
I'm going to take Toro. And the reason for that is I think the floor is higher. And I think both have a reasonable upside. Neither are elite, but I do think Urquidy has the potential to disappear. And that's the part that I would stay away from.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I said to the guy, let's put a pin in it and check back once baseball starts rolling, because I didn't want Seattle to clog the position, and I didn't want Houston to do the same thing. And then it looks like, the guys who have opportunity, all of a sudden it disappears on either side. It protects both of us. And it's to me, it's kind of the fair thing to do, because I think the deal is okay. Of course, I would like more out of it. I was look, he owns Evan White as well. And I said, well, if there's a way for me to get White, then that kind of helps me out at bat wise.
You have defensive metrics in the league you're trying to trade him for?
No, because it's fantasy, and fantasy is supposed to be fun.
So why do you want Evan White? That's
because Evan White is a perfectly good player. Anyway, let's talk about somebody who is super highly touted, and for good reason, Spencer Torkelson. Now, everyone forgets, Ty, that he will only play this year at age 22. This is a young guy. This is not a 24-year-old college bat, blah, 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 who needs to be up. But last year, my God, did he ever fly high A, double A, triple A, and then he played in the fall league. And he ended the year with a 267 average, across 3 levels, OPS 935, and he had 30 dingers to go along with that. Now, the bulk of the damage, I will say, was done at high A and double A. And then, of course, triple A. When you're playing against guys who are 5.5 years younger than you, you start to have a greater period of adjustment. Older. You start to have a greater period of adjustment. But all year long, he played against competition that was older than him. And Torkelson's the real deal Holyfield, but I think there's also going to be an adjustment period for him. And if Detroit slow plays it and we don't see much of him, we see less than 130 at bats this year, which is my prediction, that he'll still have rookie eligibility going into 2023. I think that's a good spot to put him. I've got him 13th in my rankings. He's 16th overall. Going to be a power bat, possibly 100 guy once we hit 2025 and beyond, because that Detroit lineup should just be stacked. You got that outfield, those prospect outfielders.
I see zero reason for Detroit to rush Riley Green or Torkelson, and I think they're going to play a lot of the season in AAA. I just don't see why Detroit would do it. They're not good enough to be great. So why do you want to start these contracts early? I don't get it. If they do, I think it's a mistake. Unless we see something out of whatever comes from this lockout. But I think based on what we know about discussions so far, it's not going that direction where we're going to see a major shift here. So I think for that reason, I'm going to pull Torkelson back. I think a lot of people were excited with CBA up about Torkelson. I think he moved up a lot of people's lists. I think he's way too high on everyone's right now. But great player, to your point. Like, he's going to be great. There's no questions about that. Donaldson, also great. Fun to watch. Great guy. Loves Canada. We love him. All the things line up.
Loves Canada.
Yeah, he does. He lives in Canada. Did you know that?
I did not know that. No, but I did know that he's just like an OBP machine. So if you're in your OBP leagues, you're going to want to keep him. He's only turned. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say only turning. He's turning 36 this year coming up. So we are expecting to have good seasons, retirement.
Yeah.
Not the Batista weird year that he had. I'm hoping Donaldson can go out after he's got what, Ty? 2 years left, right? This year, next year.
2 more, I believe.
He signed a 4-year contract. Yeah.
Yeah,
I could see him getting a 1 year after this, and then so we could see 3 of the next 5 good, useful years. This is a 250, 60 hitter, 25 plus dingers. Obviously, when he's healthy, he can provide a lot more than that. But he also RBI, walk machine. You know, he's doing it all for you. I shouldn't say all. He's not stealing bases, but he's doing everything else for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the big thing here for me is we've got a guy that has a 28-year-old major league inning count, a 49-year-old body, and somewhere in between is what we should expect out of him from fantasy production.
And a 13-year-old's attitude.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah. He still puts on temporary tattoos. But you know, so this is a guy that we obviously like, and I think fantasy owners should like him, and for good reason. He's done nothing but make you money if you've owned him.
Right.
But I'm with you, Robbie. I think there's a brick wall somewhere for Josh Donaldson in the guessing game that we all have over the next 2 to 5 years. Let's give it optimism. 2 to 5 years is where is that? I don't think it's less than 2. I don't think it's more than 5. And I think 5 is very unlikely. So that's the game you're playing as a Josh Donaldson owner. On the other side, you're playing the complete opposite game with Alec Baum. Like, this is a guy that we all thought could be great. Flat swing, huge human being, a good oppo gap swing, lots of like early career success, and then brick wall early on in his career. And so definitely a guy to buy. Like, I talk about this all the time. We talked about it with Alejandro Kirk. For me, I love guys, love that show a little bit of power upside, but have a flat swing through the zone, right? And Alec Baum fits that repertoire to a T, still just 25. There's a rebound here for sure, whether it's all the way back this season or the next. I just think there's too much upside here with Alec Baum. And I think most people have been like, oh, I'm scared, I'm running away. I think you should be buying Alec Baum if you don't already own him.
Yeah, and he's the guy in Philly. So, you know, pencil in the at-bats. Now, here is Ty, our top-rated prospect. That's right, it's not Spencer Torkelson, because we were talking about MLB production, and as Ty alluded to earlier, we're expecting Josh Jung of Texas to be up earlier than later, and my God, is he going to produce? And he's depending on what Texas does in the lineup with him, right? There's potential for him to even finish, if it's a full 2022 season, he could have 80 RBIs depending on who is in front of him in the lineup, because he is going to knock the ball around the field as well as knock it out of the park. And Josh Jung, you know, real deal Holyfield. I just think that this is a guy, you know.
Well, he continues to show up behind guys that are 2, 4, 3, 5, 7 years away. And I just don't get it in other people's lists. Doesn't make any sense. Like, this guy's going to produce this season. How is he not higher? And he has better career numbers in the minors than almost all the guys that are rated ahead of him. It just makes no sense. Like, this guy should be number 1 on almost every list. He's
beautiful average, right? Beautiful average, beautiful OBP, like 400 OBP last year.
Yeah.
400.
Easily, in my mind, the most underrated elite prospect in the minor leagues right now. Like, to me, it's not even close. Like, I don't know of another guy that is as underappreciated as Josh Jung. Like,
Ty, it is gonna suck when he hits $160 next year and gets demoted.
I don't care. I'm gonna die on that hill.
I'm just saying, like, we love it because we both like him. You know,
if he's my new Nomar Mazara, I got room. If you see on the screen, if you're watching the live screen, This is the
Hey,
future
did you
home
get
of
rid of?
Josh Jung.
Did you
No,
get rid of?
Nomar's up there. No, he's up there. Where?
Oh, he's up in the top. Yeah, sorry, it's covered because
Right
it says
there.
live. Yeah.
Yeah, he's under the live screen. Yep. Ahead of him, a guy that I also really like is Heimer Candelario. I think a guy that everyone assumes that infield is going to get congested, and they keep continuing to forget that Miggy cannot play in the field that much anymore. So he's going to be first baseman this year. So he's still dual position at this point, but from this point forward, he is a first baseman. And I like him. I've said it for a couple of years now, Robbie. Like, you wait till June to buy him. He has a slow starter traditionally. Maybe he resolves that this season, and maybe that's a regret to not buying him now. But I think at the end of the day, it's probably a safe risk to wait a little bit to buy on a Candelario. But I like him. He produces. He's consistent. Outside of April, I'm good with that. And as you know, Robbie, I love to own guys that suck in April. Like, that's kind of my forte as a fantasy player. I constantly start 0-4 in head-to-head leagues. That's just what I do. But when it comes playoff time, my guys are ready to go. Candelario is one of those guys that I want to count on come playoff time.
I like it. It's fair, and I'm just glad that Candelario was not the 23-year-old prospect flame out that a lot of dynasty owners were thinking originally. The next guy up, Ty, is also not a flame out Yoan Moncada, the Dingers number 11 ranked dynasty third baseman with the White Sox entering his age 27 year. Yeah, he had a rough 2020. 2021 was not amazing for him, but it was still good. And I think we're going to get to see, and all the dynasty owners out there who go and get him this offseason, or everybody that's held him, is going to get to see the true next 5 years Moncada top 10 dynasty third baseman on a great team. So he's got that loaded lineup, good pitching staff. The ability for him to be an 80-80 guy is all over for him. Like,
well, and there's been a lot of pressure especially from the fantasy community because they have control over this outcome, to make him just hit from the left side, right? Like,
but that's just because that's where his power comes from, right?
No,
he's still
but
good from both sides, but the power side seems to be his left side.
Okay from the right side, and the reality is, like, we don't have a sample of him hitting left-handed against lefties, right? So that's the big thing. Is like, could he produce from that side? We don't know because we don't have a sample. But the reality is 59 home runs from the left side against righties, 11 from the other side of the plate. So to me, you have a decent batting average, kind of a coin flip. It doesn't make a big difference, but there's a major power gap. And there's even a pretty significant slugging gap because the same gaps exist for extra base hits across the board. And I think it's just worth considering. I don't know that they'll do it, but I do think it makes him a better value if he sticks to the left side. Matt Chapman, who does hit from just one side, he just doesn't know where he's going to be hitting from the right side. Yeah, and that's it. So Matt Chapman, this is a guy that for me, I'm not ready to get excited about anywhere. I've never been a Matt Chapman guy. We saw peaks and valleys of power, but at the same time, like, he doesn't carry multiple stat value to me, and that's where I get a little turned off. And until I know where he's going, I'm not ready to get excited. Now, that said, if he ends up in a really good situation, he's going to move up my list a little bit. And I have maybe unfairly ranked at 12 on my list, Robbie. But at the same time, like, in Oakland, I think 12 is accurate. If he goes to a really good scenario, like Toronto, for example, he's 5, 6, 7, maybe. Right. But like, that's the big issue for me with Chapman.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I've got him inside. We're in our top 10. Chapman is our 10th guy here. So we are now starting to split hairs really and truly, and it's going to go season by season at this point in time. But I mean, Chapman's, pencil him in 80-80, 30 dingers. Like, there's a lot to like about him. Excuse me. One guy that I'm going to move right into him. Next guy up, number 9, Brian Hayes. This is a guy that we're banking on progression. And I think really the only guy left that we're actually banking on progression. The rest of them have at least done it. And Hayes entering his age 25 season on a crappy Pittsburgh team that we're expecting by the end of this 5-year run to not be crappy, but to actually be like a perennial, good
should be
lineup
very
team,
good.
run producing. Like you know, wins and losses can come and go based on your bullpen. Like a lot of reasons why a team could not actually get good, but you could still score a lot of runs. And Pittsburgh is in a position now where it looks like they're just going to get better. And Brian Hayes should become one of those guys who's like an 80-80 pencil him in guy. Great hit tool. And I like Hayes in Pittsburgh, but this is going to be a slow burn. So you need his average to be high to start, because that's going to help to make up for the fact that he might only have 65 runs and might only have 72 RBIs or something like that this year coming up. Depends on that lineup construction around him.
I think he falls into the same kind of category as Josh Jung, like a very underappreciated, high value fantasy guy. And I think very high floors for both of those guys. And so I think because of the injury issues with Hayes, 2 years ago, he was untouchable, right? Like he was.
No way you could get that guy.
Yeah. But now, like, he's very attainable in most formats. So, like, just don't blink. Like, try to go get him. He's still, and this is crazy, Robbie. Like, and I know we don't talk about this a lot, but 2.4 WAR last season. Like that, just think about that. Like, that's a pretty intangible number when it comes to, is this guy going to be good? Because it suggests a couple things. Obviously, the on the field production from the hit side was good, but he also probably matched it on the defensive side.
Right.
Meaning
The
he's going to
playing
get run
time.
out there.
Yeah, the playing time is going to be there. And when we've talked, I think this is the third Pittsburgh third baseman that we've discussed. And that doesn't count Morin. So that's four at least that we've discussed. This is the one. This is the best of that.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, I completely agree. Jumping ahead here, a guy that we again, very similar to Chapman. We don't know where he's going to play. The difference is he doesn't get paid right now. That's Chris Bryant. This is I think he's destined to end up back in San Francisco. I think San Francisco needs to acquire somebody, right? I think they have to find somebody to be a middle of the order talent, because if not, like, they're going to be rolling Brandon Crawford out into the 3-hole, and that is a poor decision. Love Brandon Crawford, not for that reason.
Yeah, had a great year, but that's not what he should be doing. Yeah,
and San Francisco saved a ton of money on mediocre pitching in their rotation, so they have money to spend. I think they're going to spend it on Chris Bryant, and it hurts his fantasy value. It's why I have him 10. Robbie, you have him 6. I'm assuming he ends up in San Francisco in that place. I don't know that there's a ton of upside beyond that if he ends up in a better situation, but I really dislike him in the top 10 valuation versus the list. If he ends up in San Francisco, that's why I have him so far back.
I think he has potential to be 90 runs, 90 RBIs, because I think he can be over on the RBI side and a little under possibly on the runs, depending on the lineup construction. But it's the average. It's the bounce back on the average and then the OBP. And if the park is going to zap a bit of power, I don't think that means a lot. If you're looking at the details, which would be the home runs become doubles off the wall and the run still scores, that would have been part of that home run RBI. It's now a part of just a regular RBI double, which means the OPS will be fine. It just won't be a 900 plus. It'll be 800 something. And I'd be fine with that. And that's if he stays. But as a free agent, I thought, let's be optimistic and say the best parks he can get into. And I went with that. So if that means that he adjusts back a couple spots, from 6 maybe to 8 for me next year, he's right in that range. And also his age at 30, he should have 5 years of good production. Next guy up, Ty, 5 years younger. And you, Ty, you were the guy saying you guys need to go and get him.
Yeah, I mean, it was completely obvious. Very similar to like a major league sample of what we talked about earlier with Miguel Geraldo. Like, this guy hits the ball hard, and it was obvious a breakout was coming. You could see it. And if you watch closely, and if you're a fantasy player that doesn't watch actual footage, like, this is where you can learn. A guy like Riley had the obvious indicators from real gameplay where he's hitting balls really hard at the left fielder in the playoffs in the previous in 2020. So to me, the breakout was obvious. I think we're going to see about the same. Like, there's a lot of people that are like, Austin Riley could be an MVP, could be the best player at the third base. I don't think that's what Austin Riley is. I think he's a top 10 guy, fantasy. I really do. I think he's a great baseball player in general. I don't know that the ceiling's too much higher than what we've seen. I'd love to be wrong there, but I just think there's not elite talent here. There's just great talent, and that's the gap.
And also for all the prospect owners out there prospect hounds out there who are like, I've got him. Oh no, he didn't play well. I traded him. Yeah, this is what you get when you're not patient, right?
Correct.
You watch the guy that wins your league or makes the playoffs in your league. When you don't, you watch him enjoy the success and future success he's going to have. He's only going to play this year at age 25. He is so young in baseball terms and on such a good team that runs RBIs. The ebb and flow for him is now going to come. And like Ty said, I don't think he's an MVP either. And I don't think he's a 300 hitter either. I think if he's a 200 hitter, 25 dingers and, 85, 85. Did I say 200? No, I said he's not a 300 hitter.
Yeah, but then you said if he is a 200 hitter.
280.
Okay. You forgot the 80 part, but okay. All good.
I didn't. I thought it.
I agree with you. 280 is the mark that I tag him with as well. Yeah. I think 30 home runs.
And that's still great. Like 280 average. Oh, man, at third base, that's going to put him top 5 on average.
And I think there's a chance he hits 40 home runs in the next 5 seasons in one of those seasons. I just don't think people are on this mindset of he's going to be this great guy for 5-year window. Buy him now. He's awesome. And he is great. He's great. But he's just not that guy every season. That's just the way I feel there. So Anthony Rendon, rough season, right?
Bad arrival to Los Angeles.
Yeah. It was
At least
bad.
He wasn't alone.
Yeah, and I mean, I think he's going to come back without the goat's beard that he had before. So I think clean shaven, clean start. Him and Mike Trout both back this season. Joe Adell, the awakening. Like, I love Rendon as a buy this year in every scenario because people are like, oh, he's old, he's done, he's toast, he's Donaldson, right? No, he's still going to hit, and he's going to hit around great hitters. That LA lineup is stacked.
Yeah,
there's lots to like about Rendon. And for me, in this top 10, probably one of the greatest jumps here, right? Like, I think he got overhyped the last couple seasons, in my opinion, with one really, really good season mixed in there. And I think this is the year he bounces back to that number. So for me, though, I will say this. I do think there's the trail off for Rendon. So if you're buying Rendon, it's a buy.
It's for
1 year success and a get rid of scenario. Like, he is LA's new Pujols. Big money, sits on the books for several years. The power numbers aren't there. Like, that's the thing. Like, he's had a power blip here, a couple seasons of mediocre power, and everyone's like, oh, he can do more. He's not gonna. He's just gonna reduce that power. And so we're at the peak. He's still gonna do it for another year or two. But after that, I'm out. So I have him behind you, Robbie. And I'm probably going to slowly move him back in my list. I'm not going to lie to you.
Well, we did both have him at 3 and 4 last year, respectively. I had him at 3, I had him at 4. This year, we've both moved him back 4 spots each. I've got him at 7. You've got him at 8. And I think that's probably going to continue to happen where we just inch him back, right? But again, he should have an absolute resurgence based on the last year, the 2021 stat line.
Correct.
Because Anthony Rendon is so much better than he showed last year. And you talked about it when we were talking about Lindor moving from the AL to the NL. Well, this was Rendon moving from the NL to the AL. So now we have the opportunity to see what he can actually do. And again, be healthy. I don't know how much time he spent looking at what the team was doing, looking at the opposing pitchers, all that stuff. But what I do know, like you said, Ty, stacked lineup, ability to produce.
Bring at bats against Patrick Sandoval. So that makes
oh my God, the Cy Young Award winner. Anyway, let's get to that top 5, Ty. Let's start off with your boy, Manny Machado with San Diego. All category guy.
Yeah, he does it all whenever it feels like. I've said this 100 times, I'll say it again. But the big thing about Manny Machado that nobody ever pays attention to because they don't watch him play is how much hard contact this guy makes. Like, he makes more than anybody in baseball, and he just runs into line drives that go right at the outfield. And he's gonna have a year where he is the runaway MVP. I don't know when it's gonna happen, or if it's gonna happen, or if it's just gonna be complete bad luck for his entire career. But there's gonna be a time where those line drives hit the gap consistently. And I'm just gonna say it could be this year. Like, he could be the number 1 fantasy third baseman this year. That is possible.
You know what he's going to do when he hits all of those into the gap? He's going to be driving in Ha-Seong Kim.
Ha-Seong Kim is going to be the guy giving him a towel when he gets to the bench.
All right. Anyway, number 4. I've got it written. That's funny. I've got him written in as in Colorado, Ty, but he is not there. No mores. That is Nolan Arenado. Thank goodness he made the move and did not Tulowitzki. You know?
Definitely. Yeah, I agree. This is a guy that I think everybody assumed was the Colorado effect, right? Like Arenado, everyone's like, he's gonna leave Colorado, he's gonna lose all his value. He did nothing but sustain it. Like he was a great baseball player. Anybody that watches him play should know this. He did
Team
his
made
job.
the playoffs. Like it was all good for him moving to St. Louis in year 1. And we both had him ranked 4. Like we both had Machado ranked 5. But top 3, we did not agree on any of them.
But I will say this. I think this is the last year for consistency at Arenado, and then we're going to see a slow regression. Like wear and tear, the way he plays the game, it's going to hit him differently than a lot of the guys in this list because of the way he plays defense and the way he moves. I see a backpedal from this point forward. Like this year, nothing to be worried about in my mind, barring some injury. But I think after this, we're going to see a slow regression of Arenado. Jumping ahead, a guy that I actually like to go the opposite direction and be more one of the staples here in the top 3, Alex Bregman. This is a guy that I like. He gives you everything. He's never going to give you elite power. That's the big thing with Bregman. He could be the starting shortstop in Houston this season. Who knows?
I would not be surprised if that happened. Yeah.
Yeah, it is very plausible. But this is a guy that I love watching him hit. He's gritty. He's one of those guys that you watch, you're like, how is this guy a professional athlete? And how does this guy make all this money? But he gets it done. He grinds them out. He's just
you make it sound like he's built like Cecil Fielder.
No, he's built like a guy that got 98 on the science test, and you're like, how did he get all those answers right? Like he just doesn't look like the kind of guy that should be dominating any sport, let alone being an elite player on a championship team. And he just continues to do it. And so
entering his prime, right? He's entering his age 28 season. Arenado entering his age 31. So yeah, still got youth on his side.
And he walks in with just a touch of sweat. Which naturally gets him up in my book. So entering the top 2, Robbie, I'll let you talk to the next one because I'm going to dump on him a little bit.
Yeah, so this is my number 1, and it's our Dinger's number 2, Jose Ramirez. Now, the reason that I have Ramirez number 1 and not where he finished is number 2, is because he's the only guy that will do elite things in all of the basic categories, the 5 categories. Stolen bases, nobody in the top 10 whiffs what he can put up, which is 30 plus. Home runs, he's a 30 plus guy. Runs, RBIs, 100. Like beautiful. And then an average. The average does not sink you, not at all. His bad year is still a great year. The problem is that I forget what year it was, like 17 or 18, where he basically like sucked after the All-Star break up until the following year's All-Star break.
It was 19.
But it was like 2 years, right? So it was the second half of 18 and the first half of 19, whatever it was.
Correct.
So that has skewed everyone's mind in thinking like, well, maybe he's not as good as he is. And including me, I had him ranked 2nd last year in 2020. Coming off of that weirdness, I wasn't sure what to do. I had him ranked 7th. Well, I've corrected after 2020 and was like, never mind. He is exactly as good and as dominant as he can be for you in fantasy. And it's because he can steal the bases, Ty, that I made him my number 1, because it was like almost a coin flip between 1 and 2. And it came down to the fact that, you know what, I can bank on Ramirez for steals, and what he is able to do separates him considerably at the end of the day in categories, because he's level with the next guy. He's level with your number 1. But the stolen bases just give him that edge for me. So
yeah, and listen, like I like Jose Ramirez. There's nothing I want more than the rest of this offseason than for him to end up in Toronto.
Entering his age 29 season. Sorry, just wanted to say that because it comes into effect with the number 1 guy.
100%. But I mean, for me, I just think we're entering regression. I just don't think there's growth for Jose Ramirez. I just don't think it exists moving forward. I think the stolen bases are going to come down. Like the power is going to come down. And I think ultimately still going to be a great baseball player, but I just don't think there's continued growth, which I think everybody aspires for. And I think this is where most people get trapped in early drafts. Like I've seen consistently Jose Ramirez being picked over Bo Bichette in dynasty formats. Makes no sense. Like Bo Bichette and Jose Ramirez are the same player today, and one is 5-6 years younger than the other. It's not a logical decision, right? Like live long and prosper and pick Bo Bichette.
What? Stop with the nerd references, nerd. Live long and prosper. Oh,
I said logic, and I went to the Star Trek joke. It plays. Relax.
I don't understand.
I know because you're not on the elite level of
I was waiting for you to say you're not
that
part
I
of the
am.
Force, but then that's Star Wars.
Yeah.
I know that much of it.
I've already went Star Wars. I went Star Trek. I gotta be careful with how far I go.
Okay, so you just think there's regression with Ramirez, and I think
I
there's
do.
stability, and that's fair to agree to disagree.
Still elite. Still elite. I'm just
Tell
saying.
us your number one. We're Ty. We are 2 hours in.
Yeah,
Tell us
number
the number
one is Rafael Devers, right? Like, I mean, for me,
can you believe it, folks?
I mean, he's grown, he's produced. Like, this is why we do the ranks the way we do. We dumped on Devers because it was too early for him to be number one, number two, number three. It is now his time. He can be the best guy in this list. He's still going to strike out, right? He's still going to have rough stretches, but he is going to have stretches that no one else in this list can do from a runs, RBIs, and home runs perspective. It's just no one else in this list can do it. He's in a different caliber of class that way, and that's why he's my number one. If Ramirez was 2 years younger, he'd be my number one.
Yeah, to be clear, Devers is entering age 25. Ramirez is entering 29. So when we talk about a 5-year window, that's the difference, right? Like imagine Ramirez entering 5 years ago and doing what he's doing now. Well, I think, and I agree, Ty. I think Devers is doing the same thing that Ramirez was, except the steals. But Devers on a competitive Boston team, which it looks like they're not actually going to have to rebuild. It's like that annoying Yankee. It was a retooling.
Yeah,
they just sucked for a few months, and now they're winning the AL East the next year. So
Devers might hit 40 home runs. Like
for sure. I think that's yeah. Unless they change the ball in the next 5 years, like you said about Riley, I think Devers the same thing.
Oh, yeah. Devers is definitely gonna hit 40 home runs in the next 5 years. I'm saying Devers might hit 40 home runs this year. Like that's why I have him over Ramirez, because the stolen bases, although are valuable, I think you're gonna go backwards. Whereas I think Devers is gonna be just 10 home runs ahead of Ramirez. And I think that's where the separation was for me, is that you're regressing on stolen bases. Who knows if the power is going to be there for Ramirez, but we know Devers is going to be flatlined across a couple of those categories. So that it's a coin flip. We've talked about this. Top 10, you're always, grasping at straws, but these are the subtle things that are important. And it's important to remember that when you're drafting in this group of guys, if you're picking between these top 5, 6, 7, 8 guys, who's going to be good in September? That's what you have to remember on draft day. It's easy to get lost in who's good in April, but who's going to be good in September? And don't get lost in that when you're drafting these guys. Doesn't matter the position. It's just as important as how many they get throughout the year. So, Robbie, this is the list. Their base is here. As always, we agree on nothing. I look forward to agreeing with you less next week as we move into outfield. I believe.
Yes, sir.
So outfield is, yes.
Just before you sign off, let's just recap the top 10. So at 10, we had Matt Chapman, currently with Oakland. 9, Ke'Bryan Hayes with Pittsburgh. 8, Chris Bryant, free agent. 7, Austin Riley with Atlanta. 6, Anthony Rendon with the Angels. 5, Manny Machado with San Diego. 4, Nolan Arenado with St. Louis. 3, Alex Bregman with Houston. 2, Jose Ramirez with Cleveland. And number 1, dingers ranked, third baseman, Boston's Rafael Devers.
Yeah, let's do it. Love it. Great spot to leave it. If you don't agree, hit us up at DingersPod on Twitter, at RobbieBaseball1 if you want to chirp Robbie. If you want to say nice things about me, at Attorney Boss. But until then, it's been Robbie and Tyler here on Dingers.